Do you remember when the pub felt like the center of the universe? Small enough to hold your secrets, but large enough to carry everyone's laughter without breaking. It wasn't just a building, it was a breathing thing, its walls alive with echoes of voices that never learned how to fade completely into silence. Every table carried fingerprints of conversations that mattered, polished into the grain by elbows, tears, and the comfort of another round that fixed what words couldn't. The light was always golden, not from design, but from warmth, from the simple science of shared humanity glowing against the chill of ordinary evenings. Ask yourself, when did the sound of a glass meeting wood become rarer than kindness? When did togetherness start needing reservations and Wi-Fi to exist? Every town had its heartbeat, and it pulsed through those doors, steady, patient, unremarkable in the most perfect and necessary way. You could walk in carrying the weight of a day, and somehow leave lighter, as if the room itself absorbed sorrow as part of the service. The barkeep wasn't staff. He was witness, confessor, historian, keeper of 1,000 stories poured slower than the pint that followed them. There were no strangers here, only regulars waiting to happen. People who mistook your name at first and remembered it forever afterward. The jukebox never played the same twice, even the scratches had rhythm, the kind that made nostalgia sound younger than it really was. Outside, the rain rehearsed its entrance, but inside the night performed like it had been written just for those who showed up. Every laugh ricocheted against old plaster, chipped and soft, like time itself applauding the persistence of ordinary joy. You never needed to speak to belong. Breathing was enough. Existing within arm's reach of another heartbeat was the whole transaction. Britain's soul was distilled here, not in parliaments or papers, but in pints and pauses, in the courage of people staying just a little longer. Do you remember how the light looked through the window, streaked with smoke and weather, turning everyone into a familiar silhouette? There was magic in that simplicity. Unplanned evenings that became the stories people told decades later when nothing else seemed real anymore. The pub didn't promise happiness, it promised shelter. And that was somehow better, quieter, more honest than joy could ever afford to be. Every creak of the floorboard had character. Every stool remembered the weight of those who trusted it too many nights in a row. Ask yourself, when did we start trading warmth for convenience? When did comfort begin to arrive in paper cups with names spelled wrong? Even closing time felt gentle, as if the building itself needed rest, but hated to disappoint the hearts, still unwilling to go home. Outside the street waited, colder now, lonelier somehow, as if the world had forgotten the language spoken only in laughter and shared silence. The lock clicked softly, and the night swallowed the last light, but you knew it wasn't the end, just another promise to return. That's what a real pub was. Not an escape from life, but a rehearsal for surviving it, one quiet evening at a time. Maybe we didn't lose the pubs, maybe we just forgot how to arrive without needing a reason, without checking the time or the phone. Because the truth is, no one ever went to the pub for a drink. They went for proof that the world still made sense together. And somewhere, maybe in a forgotten village or a quiet London street, one door still opens to that sound. Laughter, wood, forgiveness, belonging. Every town once had a place like this, its windows glowing against the fog, promising warmth to anyone brave enough to step inside and stay a while. You didn't need money to belong, you just needed time, patience, and the willingness to listen to someone else's story before telling your own. Every story began the same way. You'll never believe what happened, and ended in laughter that made belief unnecessary and truth optional. The pub didn't demand performance, it rewarded presence, asking only that you showed up and remembered how to be a person among people again. Do you remember how the air smelled different after rain? Damp coats, old wood, a trace of tobacco, and something heartbreakingly human underneath it all. Every pint pulled was a small ceremony, a reminder that the simplest gestures can still carry the weight of ritual and gratitude. The walls were lined with photographs no one posed for, faces frozen mid-laugh, mid-song, mid-life. Proof that happiness was once unedited and unfiltered. Someone always brought news from down the road, another brought gossip, another brought silence that needed no apology or explanation. It was never about entertainment, it was about endurance. How a small room could hold the weight of an entire community night after night. Every pub was a confession booth without rules, where truth slipped out disguised as jokes, and forgiveness came served in glass rather than prayer. You could see history in the scratches on the tables, each mark an accidental autograph left by time and conversation. Ask yourself, when did we start fearing silence? When did every pause become a void we had to fill with noise or distraction? The pub understood silence better than any sermon. It taught us that peace doesn't always require quiet, only closeness. Even arguments felt holy, wrapped in mutual understanding that tomorrow would still arrive, and so would everyone who mattered. There were rules, unwritten but sacred. Respect the bar, mind your round, never leave before saying goodbye. And somehow, those small laws of decency built a world more civilized than all our modern sophistication combined. You didn't post your evenings, you remembered them, blurry but bright, stitched into the fabric of who you became. When did living stop being enough, replaced by the pressure to prove it happened? The pub never needed proof. It trusted the honesty of the moment, the warmth of the crowd, the echo of your own laughter. Maybe that's what we lost. Not the buildings themselves, but the patience to sit still long enough for meaning to arrive unannounced. Now, we chase connection through screens, forgetting that real connection was once found across sticky tables and half-empty glasses. You can't digitize belonging. No matter how clear the pixels, it needs breath, eye contact, the fragile miracle of mutual understanding. Do you remember that last time you stayed longer than you meant to, because the night just felt too kind to leave behind? That's what mattered. Not the beer, not the chatter, but the rare grace of being allowed to exist without expectation. And when you finally stepped outside, the night air didn't feel cold. It felt earned, like the quiet after a prayer well said. Some nights the world outside felt impossible, but once you crossed that threshold, the noise softened, replaced by something older and truer than certainty itself. There was always a place for you, even when you arrived late, even when you said nothing, even when you didn't know what you needed yet. Every pub had its quiet heroes. The man who listened more than he spoke. The woman who refilled glasses before anyone asked. The laughter that healed the room. Ask yourself, who were they in your life? And where do they sit now that the lights are gone and the music's been folded away? We tell ourselves progress means better, but how do we measure better when comfort, patience, and proximity have become endangered words? A pint wasn't just a drink. It was time made visible. A liquid pause between the world's demands and your own heartbeat, finding its balance again. The best pubs had no ambition, just consistency, kindness, and a stubborn refusal to rush the clock for anyone. Every evening felt borrowed from eternity, and nobody cared to return it because who wants to hurry through warmth? Outside, the rain rehearsed its rhythm. Inside, the fire hummed along. Two old friends keeping each other company through the years. Do you remember the corner seat, the one that always seemed to wait for you no matter how late you came back? That seat wasn't just furniture, it was memory with legs, proof that belonging could be built from repetition and forgiveness. Even the arguments had affection in them, sharp only on the surface but soft beneath, like bark protecting the tree from weather. The jukebox played songs that didn't age, not because they were timeless, but because the people singing them refused to. In that dim light, everyone looked kinder, gentler, more human. Maybe that's what real warmth does. Blurs flaws until all you see is soul. When the last call came, it wasn't an ending. It was a reminder that joy always carries responsibility. To return, to remember, to refill. The barkeep rang the bell, not as dismissal, but as benediction, granting closure to those who'd borrowed light a little longer than expected. Outside, the world kept turning faster, but for a moment, inside it forgot how. And that was mercy enough. The pub was never about escape. It was about arrival. A place that reminded you home isn't where you live, but where you're understood. Even now, if you listen closely walking down an empty street, you might hear it. The low hum of yesterday still asking to be noticed. Somewhere beyond the neon and noise, there's still a door that opens to that sound. The gentle clink of glass, the sigh of being seen. Maybe it's waiting for you, maybe for all of us, to remember that what we call past was simply a better version of together. We can rebuild it, not as nostalgia, but as necessity, because people still need places where hearts can rest without explanation. Do you believe we can learn again how to gather, how to linger, how to care without transaction? If we can, then the last public house was never the last. It was just a pause before the next toast begins. Even now, in cities of glass and light, there are corners that remember the rhythm of laughter. echoes hiding beneath concrete where warmth once lived. We build higher towers, but none have windows that glow the way pub windows did. Soft, forgiving, slightly drunk on human company. Progress promised connection, yet people talk less, touch less, trust less. And all the while, we pretend efficiency can replace empathy. Ask yourself, when was the last time you lingered anywhere without checking the clock, just to let a moment finish breathing? The pub was a sanctuary, disguised as routine, ordinary enough to be ignored until it was gone. And suddenly, nothing else felt enough. There was genius in its simplicity, no agendas, no branding. Only the humble art of existing side by side without purpose. Even silence had texture there, shaped by wood, warmth, and the knowledge that company didn't always need words to mean something. Somehow, those rooms taught us more about peace than 1,000 self-help books ever could. And for the price of a pint at that. Now we sit in offices lit too bright, pretending comfort is productivity. Scrolling past joy we no longer know how to hold. Maybe that's why nostalgia hurts. It isn't longing for the past, but mourning the parts of ourselves we left behind it. Every shuttered pub carries ghosts, not of the dead, but of the living, of every laugh that hasn't yet found its way back home. The paint may peel, the signs may fade, but listen close enough and you'll still hear the murmur of belonging humming beneath the dust. Do you remember the regular who always told the same story, slightly wrong each time, and how everyone still laughed like it was new? That was kindness, not patience. The collective decision to make space for imperfection, to let humanity breathe without correction. You don't find that online. The algorithm doesn't understand affection disguised as teasing, or silence offered as support. The pub did, effortlessly, because it was built by hands that valued proximity more than perfection. Maybe that's why we keep returning in memory. Because deep down, every soul needs a room where nothing extraordinary happens and everything matters. The future will have its screens and systems, but someone, somewhere, will always crave the sound of chairs dragging across wooden floors. And maybe that craving is where hope begins, in the unshakable belief that we can still find our way back to one another. So when you pass a boarded window, don't look away. Whisper thanks to the ghosts for keeping the light warm until we return. Because the story of Britain isn't finished, just pause for breath, waiting for us to remember that home is always built in company. The last public house isn't a relic, it's a reminder, a quiet voice saying, you belonged once, and you still do, if you'll only come back. And if one day someone lights the fire again, we'll know we never really lost it. We only forgot where to look. That's the miracle of places like these. They wait, endlessly patient, teaching us that even endings can still taste like welcome. Someday, a new door will open where an old one stood, and light will spill out again, carrying the scent of hope, dust, and ale. Someone will polish the counter, not for profit, but for pride. Because some crafts survive extinction purely out of stubborn love. The first visitor will hesitate, unsure if this resurrection belongs to them, until a stranger smiles and makes the answer unnecessary. Music will return, not loud, not modern, just familiar enough to remind everyone how sound can feel like memory, finding its shape again. Ask yourself, when that happens, will you walk in? Or will you stand outside, pretending you don't need the warmth waiting inside for you? Every chair will creak with recognition, like an old friend stretching awake after a long, dreamless sleep. The new walls will smell faintly of fresh paint and ghost. The living and the gone coexisting politely as they always did. Laughter will stumble back into practice, rusty at first but soon fluent, because joy never truly forgets its native tongue. There will be photos on the walls again. Not famous faces, just ordinary people doing the holy work of being alive together. And maybe that will be enough to remind us what civilization actually means. Shared time, shared breath, shared mercy between strangers. The pub was never about the drink. It was about the proof that we're still capable of care without reason. Each toast was a tiny rebellion against loneliness, a declaration that life, however small, was worth gathering around. Do you remember that sound, the collective sigh when someone said, "Same again"? That was community disguised as a routine. The world outside may have changed beyond recognition, but inside these walls, humanity stays gloriously analog. A bar stool doesn't care what you do for a living, it only asks if you'll sit, stay, and make room for another story. And stories will come, as they always do, about love, lost, jobs hated, dreams postponed, all tied together by laughter that refuses to die. Someone will spill a pint, someone will sing too loud, someone will cry quietly, and none of it will need fixing. Because the point was never perfection, it was participation, showing up for life as it actually is, not as we pretend online. Ask yourself, how many problems in this world could be softened by one long evening of listening and unpolished conversation? That's what the last public house taught us, that belonging is handmade, slow brewed, and always slightly messy around the edges. Even if the rest of the world forgets, the next generation will rediscover it, because the need for closeness is older than technology. They'll learn again that warmth isn't downloaded, that friendship can't be shipped, that some truths are only told across sticky tables. And maybe that's how the story ends. Not in silence, but in song, rising softly from a room that remembers how to care. So when the bell rings time, it won't mean goodbye. It'll mean thank you. See you tomorrow. The fire's still burning for you. Outside, the night will wait patiently, watching the windows glow like lanterns stitched into the fabric of memory and ordinary grace. Rain will tap against the glass, curious, like an old friend asking whether it's still welcome to stay a while longer by the fire. Inside, someone will talk about politics, someone about football, someone about nothing at all. And all of it will matter equally. Every word will carry weight because it's spoken aloud, unedited, imperfect and alive, echoing in a world that forgot how to listen. The barkeep will smile the same way his father once did. Half amusement, half devotion, a gesture older than the walls themselves. Do you remember how light felt on your face when the door opened and laughter spilled out like a promise kept too long? That light still exists. It never left. It just wandered until it found a reason to return home again. The first winter night will be the hardest. The wind loud, the streets empty, but the fire inside will hold steady, small and defiant. You'll hear the sound of chairs shifting closer, of lives expanding quietly to make room for someone new. That's the miracle of these places. They multiply comfort without dividing it, giving more the more they're shared. Someone will raise a glass to the old world, another to the new, and someone softer will whisper, to us, sealing the night like prayer. No one will take a photo. The moment will be too busy being real to perform for proof. And that's how it should be. Memory doesn't need resolution, only repetition, to stay warm enough to matter. The clock will tick, but slower now, as if time itself has chosen to linger, unwilling to leave a good conversation unfinished. Ask yourself, when did we start mistaking stillness for waste? When did we decide life must always move faster to mean something? In the pub, time obeyed people, not the other way around, and that rebellion was the purest kind of freedom left to us. Even the air felt loyal, heavy with old laughter and new beginnings, stitched seamlessly together over another round. Every evening here was a chapter without plot, a gathering without agenda, proof that peace is something humans can still make with their hands. The world outside will always invent reasons to divide us, but these walls remember the oldest truth. People need people, not perfection. And maybe one day, when the fire burns low and the glasses stand empty, someone will whisper the story again, about the last public house that never really ended. Morning will find the pub still breathing its slow, quiet breath. The tables will be scattered with echoes, the floor marked by footprints that chose not to rush home. The sunlight will spill across the counter, touching bottles like stained glass windows, baptizing the room in forgiveness and ordinary holiness. Someone will mop the floor, humming the same tune sung by countless cleaners before, unaware they are keeping a nation's rhythm alive. The smell of last night will linger faintly, hops, smoke, bread, and laughter blending into something you can almost name if you close your eyes long enough. Do you remember mornings like that, the stillness before the next chapter? The feeling that the world outside could wait a little longer. That pause was never laziness, it was recovery. The sacred art of resetting the soul before the day began again. Every pint poured the night before was now memory, evaporating into daylight. But the warmth it left behind refused to leave entirely. Even empty, the pub was never truly empty. It held the residue of presence, like the sea holding the ghost of a wave long gone. You could hear it in the pipes, the slow heartbeat of plumbing, and time whispering that belonging doesn't end when the crowd goes home. Somewhere a kettle boiled, a chair creaked, a radio muttered half a song, and that was enough to prove life was still unfolding. Ask yourself, when did we start needing purpose in every moment? When did existing quietly stop being considered a worthy act of living? The pub never asked for purpose, it offered space. And in that space, people remembered who they were before the world demanded performance. Every scratch on the bar, every stain on the wall, every wobble in the stool was testimony that imperfection was proof of love, not decay. If you stood there long enough, you could almost hear the ghost laughing, telling you it's all right. Everything you lost still knows your name. That's the secret the last public house kept safe, that nothing good ever really disappears. It just changes the way it waits to be found again. And when the next night comes, when the lights glow once more and voices return, the story will pick up exactly where it paused. Because this is not nostalgia, it's continuity, the stubborn heartbeat of a people who still believe in the worth of gathering simply to be. Do you remember now, not the place itself, but the feeling, the permission to rest, the safety of being part of something unremarkable yet whole? That's what the pub gave us. That's what the world still needs. A place to stop pretending and start remembering how to stay human. Outside, the city will wake. The traffic loud, the sky pale, the people already late for something they will not remember by evening. But somewhere behind a modest sign, a light will flicker on again quietly, without announcement, like history breathing back into its lungs. The door will open, the smell will return. That unmistakable mixture of toast, dust, and hope too stubborn to vanish completely. Someone will place 2 coins on the counter, not for the drink but for the ritual. The exchange of small mercy disguised as transaction. Do you remember paying not for beer but for belonging? For the right to sit in warmth and be nobody for a little while. That's the truth everyone forgot. The pint was never the point. It was a permission to pause, to exist between obligations and expectations. The stools will fill slowly, the silence thinning, replaced by voices, each one tentative at first, then certain, then familiar. There will be laughter again, hesitant, like a child walking barefoot on new grass, and then louder when it learns the ground still holds. Ask yourself, why does that sound feel ancient? Maybe because it is older than progress, older than profit, older than loneliness itself. The pub never sold alcohol, it sold atmosphere, it sold return. The miracle of leaving the same door twice and feeling reborn both times. Every generation rediscovers this without meaning to, because the need for warmth is not cultural, it's human. It's carved into bone. Someone will tell a story that goes nowhere, and everyone will listen, because that's the only kind of story that ever mattered here. Outside, screens will glow with curated perfection, but inside, imperfection will rule, again, perfectly unbothered by its lack of audience. There will be no hashtags, only names spoken aloud, the way names are meant to sound. Alive, immediate, fragile, and real. And for a few hours, the world will make sense again, as if the universe itself took a breath and decided not to end tonight. Because meaning was never lost, it was just hiding in plain sight, behind a bar, under a flickering lamp, waiting for company. Do you feel it now? That warmth, that pull, that quiet invitation, reminding you that progress means nothing if we forget how to linger. The last public house was never last. It was a promise disguised as a memory, waiting patiently for us to remember our own design. So when you hear the bell ring time, don't leave too quickly. It's not a farewell. It's the sound of life asking for one more round. The next morning, the streets will smell of rain and bread, and the faint sweetness of night turned into memory by the sunrise. Someone will pass the window, glance inside, see chairs upturned and lights dim, and feel an ache without knowing what exactly is missing. Inside, the air will still hold warmth, like a secret, like a promise that comfort can outlast the noise of progress if tended carefully enough. Do you remember the way shadows moved across the walls during quiet hours? How they looked like history, changing shape but never leaving completely. Every glass, waiting to be cleaned, will catch the light like a trophy for survival, proof that joy once lived here and plans to return. The barkeep will unlock the door again, humming under his breath, keeping rhythm with the steady heartbeat of a place that refuses extinction. Ask yourself, why do such ordinary spaces feel holy? Maybe holiness was always this simple: a table, a chair, and time shared freely. A pub was never built to impress. It was built to endure, to outlast storms, wars, heartbreak, and every version of tomorrow. Even empty, it teaches something vital. That stillness is not absence, that silence is the sound of a story catching its breath. You can't digitize that. You can't code the smell of wood and smoke, or program the feeling of being seen without judgment. Outside, the world will call it nostalgia, but inside it will feel like truth rediscovered, one laugh at a time. Someone will hang a new photo on the wall. The face is modern, but the posture identical. Shoulders leaned close, eyes half closed in mid-laughter. That's how legacy survives. Not through monuments, but through the ordinary insistence of people showing up again and again to share the same small joy. Every generation thinks it invented connection until it finds itself craving a pub, a pint, a pause, and a heartbeat nearby. Progress might change the skyline, but it can't change this need. The hunger for unedited conversation and gentle company. The last public house will stand for that idea, for the stubborn belief that we still know how to care without reason. Do you remember now the sound of rain against glass, the hush that followed a good joke, the sigh that meant I'm home? That's what we're trying to find again. Not the building, but the belonging. The comfort of knowing someone will notice if you don't arrive. Because the story of a pub was never written. It was spoken nightly into being. One round, one nod, one shared silence at a time. And one night, years from now, when the streets are quiet again, someone will tell this story. Not from memory, but from experience reborn in new life. They'll speak of a small door that opened to a world unchanged by progress, untouched by hurry, alive with the hum of patience and care. Inside, they'll find a laughter unashamed of age, a song sung badly but beautifully, because nobody ever sang to impress, only to belong. The barkeep will smile, a tired, honest smile, the kind that forgives every absence and welcomes every return as if no time has passed. Do you remember the taste of that first pint? The way it carried something deeper than flavor, a sweetness made from survival and shared air. That taste was never about beer, it was about humanity, distilled into moments we could hold between our hands and call our own. Every clink of glass was a heartbeat, every story a thread in the long, unbroken fabric of ordinary British grace. The last public house will stand not as a relic, but as a proof that kindness can outlive neglect and still pour itself generously. We'll call it tradition, but it will feel like truth rediscovered, not invented, simply waiting, patient and proud to be needed again. Someone will say, "This is what we were," and someone younger will answer, "No, this is what we still are, just quieter now." And in that exchange, something timeless will stir, reminding us that belonging doesn't end. It only changes the room it lives in. Outside, the night will fold around the building gently, as if protecting a candle too small to matter, but too bright to forget. Inside, the fire will burn low but steady. The same flame that once warmed our grandparents and now waits faithfully for us to notice. Ask yourself, what would happen if we all paused just long enough to listen to that heartbeat again? Would the world feel less lonely? Because maybe the future isn't something we build. Maybe it's something we remember together, pint by pint, story by story. When the bell rings time, it won't be an ending. It will be a reminder that every gathering carries a promise to return. And as the door closes behind you, the street will seem softer, the air warmer, as if the world itself whispered, "Welcome home."